Uber is a big influence on the mobile market, and a lot of us try to replicate their functionality and design. In this module, I'll try to create an Uber application clone, but let's discuss a bit what that means. Let's start by setting expectations in place. I'm not going to build everything in the app as there are so many nuances and details within the final app that it would be impossible to go through everything. However, I will build most of the big ticket UI elements, and I'll actually try and focus on the hard stuff rather than doing things that are mostly simple. I chose to clone the existing app rather than building my own, since I want to show a professional grade application, and Uber is pretty much that. The goal of this module is to teach the theory of building a professional app. It's not there for the purpose of rebuilding Uber. I'll use Spring Boot as usual for the server, but I'll try to keep it bare. It's actually better to do stuff in the server in real-world scenarios, but in this case I want to focus on client development. I'm trying to create a close clone, but not an identical clone. Doing that last bit between identical and pretty close is a huge amount of effort that doesn't provide a benefit. In fact, it makes things worse because it forces the code and design to be more convoluted. I will spend a lot of time in the map UI and try to explain how to build a decent GIS application. This isn't a GIS tutorial though, as I'm not an expert in that field. I took some shortcuts in building this app, so hopefully they don't show much. Before we start, we need to essentially understand the functionality of Uber. Even if you used the app in the past, a lot of the functionality is pretty subtle, and you might have run through it without noticing. We need to grab screenshots of Uber features that we can review and compare to what we are trying to implement. Once we have those images, we can use them to create a mock-up of the Uber UI. Once the mock-up is in place, we can create a server and then connect the whole thing together and fill in the details as we move along. This is pretty similar to the process I use to build all the apps in the course. As you will notice, I prefer building the UI first and think it's always the best approach. When we finish the app, it should be fully working app, but you will probably need some work in order to bring it to production grade. I'll try to highlight the bits that are necessary as we move through the UI. There are some great transition animations in the Uber app, which you can see here. I'll go into some details of how we can achieve some of them near the end of the module. We'll start by focusing on the basic skeleton UI. Notice that these animations differ between Android and iOS. Now let's go into the screenshots I captured of the Uber application. This shows that even a major native app can have UX blunders. We have the Uber logo splash screen followed by a permission prompt for location. But let's move on. This is the basic login flow to Uber. One of the first things I checked is the look in landscape mode. Turns out that Uber doesn't support that. The app is fixed to portrait on mobile phones. It doesn't seem to have much support for tablets either, which makes some sense as you would probably not hail a cab with a tablet. This allows them to simplify some of their user experience logic, and we can probably use a similar approach. There are two options for login. The first uses social login through Google, Facebook, and that falls to the native login option. The second one uses SMS-style activation by collecting the phone number. We have support for that in our SMS activation CN1 lib. The UIs shown here are all very simple, clean, and minimalistic, which should make them very easy to replicate in Codename 1. On the right, you can see a simple form that allows us to select a country if the one we detected isn't correct. It's a simple list with flags and search. Notice that when you scroll down in the form, the title collapses in the material design style to provide a more compact view. The SMS activation process works with 4 digits. It doesn't seem to automatically offer to grab the SMS, which is pretty lame. We can do better than this. I don't understand why Uber wouldn't do something better on Android where it's possible. One important thing to notice is the way the digit input looks. These are 4 separate digits, but they have one error message below. When a number is already active in the server, you can use your password and get a password reset form, which I didn't include in the screenshots. I'm not sure I'll go into that level of detail with the implementation. One thing that is missing from the screenshots is the next button progress effect, which is pretty cool. When you press the arrow button, the screen tints and the arrow is surrounded by a circular blue progress bar. That should be pretty easy to accomplish in Codename 1, so it's something I'll try to do as well. The UI itself is mostly the map, which is great. There are the cars and landmarks highlighted in the map. The Where To text field isn't really a text field, it's a button. When you click on it, you see the search form to find directions to order an Uber that you can see in the screenshot next to the map. Notices can be swiped from the bottom. This is a doable element, but it's non-trivial, so I won't go into it with this app and ignore that specific element. We can see 2 floating buttons of recent searches, trips that you can repeat. That should be pretty easy to replicate as well. Notice that the side menu icon that just floats with no title to disturb the UI of the application. One of the small details is the fact that the menu button is black surrounded by a white outline. That means it will be reasonably visible both on a dark and light map. That's a great attention to detail. Once we pick a location, we can get a UI prompt with an order option. It also shows the direction on the map, highlighting my location and destination. If we open the side menu, we can see the design is very simple. I'll skip the Uber for Business stuff in the app we make, but I'll try to reproduce this exact UI design. Notice how the minimalistic design that even skims on colors is able to broadcast elegance. Payment is a relatively simple user experience. I won't go into it at all because we can just integrate Braintree for billing and skip on some of these complexities. Credit card billing is problematic not just due to technical difficulties but due to liability. I wouldn't go into that unless I had to. I won't go into the details of each of these forms. Notice I blocked out in red some private information about my trip that isn't really important. One thing you should notice is how simple these UIs are. I won't really get into them, but they should be pretty trivial. The iOS version is remarkably similar to the Android version, both in design and transitions. Notice that the login form has some pretty cool background rotation animation. But other than that, only the transitions differ in the app. Everything else looks identical. Even the text input and the floating action button. This will make our lives much easier.